Hello everybody, welcome to the Great Dynamics podcast. My name is Ahmed Hassan, and today with me a very special guest. With me is Mick Hawks. Mick spent 24 years in the military, of which 12 at the 22 SAS, including 6 years in covert operations, 2 years as a military advisor to British Secret Intelligence Services in London, MI5 for covert operations, and the last 22 years in corporate security operating out of Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Colombia, Sudan, Libya, and West Africa. He started together with his daughter, Hawks & Co., and he's going to tell us a lot more about that.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the invite, Ahmed, and much appreciated for giving us the time to explain exactly what we do.
So yeah, thank you, Mick, for coming on. Could you tell us a little bit about your history and very interesting history and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent 22 years in the military. Started off in the Royal Artillery. I did a commando course. Ended up in Scotland for about 8 years, and then decided I got bored. To be honest, being a commando, because we were doing the same things every year, and it just got a bit tedious. But during that commando phase, I went to Northern Ireland and was involved in the Falklands War. But apart from them two, I'm not the best camp soldier. I'm not a big fan of saluting and marching around and stuff like that. It's not me. So I ended up volunteering to join 22 SAS. I did SAS selection. Got injured on the first one, and then was very lucky to pass the second one, if that makes sense. And the problem is a lot of people attempt SAS selection, and a lot of people get injured in the training process, the selection process, who actually would make very good SAS soldiers, but unluckily their bodies tend to give out before they actually start the proper training. So I always class myself as very lucky to have got through that phase and joined. And I ended up in B Squadron, mountain troop, for my sins. While I was in 22, we had quite an active sort of time. Bosnia was kicking off. I did undercover work in Northern Ireland, quite long hair. I used to get stopped at customs back in the UK because I looked like a drug smuggler. Really long blonde hair with a big gold pirate earring in. Probably didn't go down too well. And the disappointment on the customs officials when they used to show them a British Army ID card, and they just couldn't believe it, I suppose. So did that. I ended up doing a 2-year stint in London, working with MI5 as a military advisor, which was quite interesting, to say the least. And then my final 2 years really was an instructor back in Hereford, teaching close quarter battle and stuff like that, which was very enjoyable, very fulfilling to do a final 2 years, actually passing on experience to the younger people. And then thereafter, I then spent 22 years really, so another lifetime doing corporate security all around the world, predominantly in high-risk areas, Iraq, Afghanistan initially, Equatorial Guinea, which was quite an interesting story because I actually got kicked out of the country in Equatorial Guinea. But I ended up with a very, very good organisation called SBM Offshore, who predominantly work offshore, hence the offshore sort of side of it. But they operate in countries all around the world, Brazil, Angola, Nigeria, for instance, China, Singapore. So I managed to get all around there. And what we did was when I first joined the company as a regional HSSE manager, actually for West Africa, that was my first role before I became head of security. And we had a bit of a blank canvas because they had no security culture within the company. One of their vessels had just been attacked by pirates. One expat was killed. Another one was badly injured, lost his arm. Actually, got hit in the arm with a high velocity round. So we needed to change things, if that makes sense. And I happen to have very, very good directors of the company who allowed me to start painting a canvas and what we needed. And the thing that we really needed was a security culture within the organisation. So they allowed me to get that up and running, not only in Nigeria, because predominantly I was based in Nigeria, because Nigeria was our problem child, and it's a lot easier to run security issues actually from the country that is causing you most problems, because they were actually, SBM Offshore were actually based in Monaco, and it would have been too easy just to plonk myself in Monaco, sipping my pink champagne, and then trying to run security from there. But that's not me. I'm as I alluded to in my military thing, I'm not the best camp soldier, so I'm not the best office person. I'm more very much hands-on, and thankfully for the head of SBM Offshore, the CEO of the company was very aligned with that attitude of having managers actually out there doing things, if that makes sense. So
being hands-on.
It was all good. So I did 15 years altogether, and I left 2 years ago. But in that 15 years, we had 0 security incidents worldwide in the high-risk environments. And that just goes to prove that if you've got a security culture within the organisation, it works, if that makes sense. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I had a bit of a light bulb incident. I was sat in The Hague, which is where I was based for the last 8 years. And I just thought I could easily do what I'm doing now, or do something different. And the easy option would have been just to stay where I am and just work until I retire. But I actually wanted to write a book, and not the normal SAS type book that you normally see. I wanted the book to be about helping people. So people that hit a brick wall in life, how you using a bit of a SAS mentality, how you can navigate around that. So we did the book, and with a fantastic individual who was the co-writer called Nicole Johnson, who's an Australian girl. She's very left wing. She's a feminist. And she used to work for Gordon Brown when he was the Prime Minister. So the last person you would ever expect to write an SAS book, if that makes sense. But unfortunately, with Nicole, she died 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm so
absolutely. Devastating. And they, unfortunately, as the book was about to go to the publisher, Nicole started to get very, very ill and succumbed to that illness about 2 weeks ago. So what we're trying to do in honor of her as a writer, but also publish the book, is to get someone to actually finish it and get it printed. And a lot of this is really for the family, because the family came over. Bev and Colin, who is her parents, they came all the way over. They were obviously devastating time for them, losing their daughter, but they're very keen on trying to get this final book, because it was a final bit of work, I suppose. So get the book finally finished in the same manner that she wrote it, if that makes sense, without any. So what we're trying to do is get a writer that actually knows Nicole, because it makes more sense rather than just giving the book to or the manuscripts and everything else to someone who doesn't know her, and will probably change everything. That's not really what we want. So hopefully that'll be done. So So that's ongoing at the moment. But on the other side, what I wanted to do was start a security company up, because as a family security company, because I've got 3 boys in the military who can come and join me at any time. But also my daughter, who has got the same mentality as the 3 boys, but she works with my ex-wife, amicable divorce, so we get on very well together. We have Christmas dinners together. Anyone out there who's thinking about getting a divorce, make sure it's amicable, because it saves you a world of pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I use my daughter. So because of her mentality, she walked up Ben Nevis at the age of 7, which is no mean feat, to be honest. I've seen adults, I've seen young soldiers give up walking up Ben Nevis, and she did it at the age of 7, obviously following her brothers and her dad on the way up there. So she's got quite a feisty sort of mentality. So I thought personally, when you're teaching personal safety, situation awareness, which includes breakaway, someone grabs you out of breakaway, and restraint training, it's ideal having a young female, participate in that, because when we're teaching kids, especially, and females, they relate to my daughter rather than, the ex-old crusty SAS guy. So I just concentrate on the personal safety, situation awareness side of it, as she does the physical side of it, because when they see her doing it, for them, it becomes more believable, if that makes sense. So we take it from there.
You lived a life, I think, for 5 people. I wanted to circle back a little bit, if that's okay with you, and when you got injured during selection, what went through your mind? Because you talk a lot about mental toughness and
devastated. Absolutely, it's probably one of the worst feelings in the world. Because people that go on SAS selection, they generally do it because it's their last chance really of having a great military career. Because I didn't want to stay up in Arbroath, Scotland. I wanted to move away from there. So for me, doing SAS selection was the natural choice, if that makes sense. So picking up an injury and coming off selection, and then having to hand all your equipment in, to be patted on the head, well done, unlucky, give it another bash, is actually quite devastating. But the fallback to that was, I went back to Arbroath to train to get back on selection, and I actually met my future wife during that period. So instead of going back on, so I came off on a winter course, and I was going to go back on the summer course straight away. No break whatsoever. Get straight back into it. But because I met my future wife, Kim, we had a steady relationship ready, and actually I put off going back on selection by nearly 3 years, if that makes sense, and much to the displeasure of some of the guys I was on selection with, because they were sending messages up, get rid of that woman and get yourself back on selection. But as it transpired, we got married. We got married up in Scotland, and then we moved down to Plymouth because I became an instructor on the All Arms Commando course to get people through the commando training. And my eldest son was born in Plymouth in December, in January. And literally he was about a week old when I went back on SAS selection, and I never saw him again until 6 months' time. Which
wow.
So it's
that's a sacrifice.
Yeah, it is. It's trying hard to explain that you have to have this mental. You have to tune into, I am doing SAS selection and nothing else matters. And it's funny because I was in the jungle, and the jungle part of SAS selection is probably the hardest part of selection because not only is it physically demanding, but very mentally demanding as well. And there was a fellow soldier from the Royal Signals, I think it was, but he came up for a chat. And he mentioned that I understand you've got a young baby boy, and actually wanted me to start talking about family, and I blew him off completely. I said, "Listen, not interested," and I walked away because the last thing you need in the places like the jungle is to start thinking about home life. And I think this was a call for help from him, which I didn't identify because the next day he gave up and came off for selection, and a lot of that was probably because he was thinking of his home life, and because he also had a young child as well. And I really just wanted to reach out to someone, but it wasn't for me, try to, talk about family life and that lot was just not for me. So the easy option for me was to throw him away. Yeah, and as I alluded to earlier on, lucky enough to get through, because bizarrely we had a fatality in the jungle. Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't one of the recruits. It was actually one of the guys that was playing the enemy, and unfortunately there was an accident, and someone died. So that was my introduction really to the SAS. It's a lot.
No easy day.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of people. We get a lot of injuries doing training in the SAS, and the reason being is you have to train for reality, if that makes sense. So all your training is right on the very edge. Some people probably don't understand that, but our range work is not like normal British Army range work. Where you get certain angles to fire your weapons, safety angles and stuff like that. That we don't have any of that because you don't have them angles when you're actually on operations. So you have to train as if it's real, and unfortunately, what comes with that are accidents, if that makes sense, and it's part and parcel of the job. But it does, when you actually see it firsthand, especially on training when you're first, that's me trying to get into SAS selection, and oh, by the way, you stood next to an individual that's been unfortunately accidentally shot and killed. Is a bit of a shock to the system, but it's again, your mindset is I'm here to do a job and just get on with it. It's just you just got to understand that it's no longer a game. If you want to join special forces, there's an inherent risk. To everything you do within special forces, and part of the training is that risk.
Yeah, and so you go to the selection, which is plagued by this crazy incident. You then pass selection. What is the first day like?
Oh, a relief. Yeah, because when you actually get told, because we were all herded. And there's 12 of us, so 170 people started, and 12 of us passed at the end of it. So, yeah, it was a massive relief, and to be given your SAS berry, and you get a blue staple belt that gets issued. The RSM, Regimental Sergeant Major, comes into the little cinema, tells you well done, blah blah blah, but now it's you've only just started now, if that makes sense, and then you literally get told what squadron and what troop you're going to go to, and I obviously wanted to go to B squadron, and I wanted mountain troop, bizarrely. Nobody normally likes to go to mountain troop. They prefer doing air troop or boat troop or mobility, but I wanted to go to mountain troop, and I got exactly what I wanted. So it was great, and at the time I had an absolutely fantastic sergeant major of B Squadron, quite sort of celebrity individual, extremely good person. Had been through a lot in his military career, so was very well respected. But he welcomed us into the squadron, and then literally 2 weeks later, we're deployed on a major exercise, and our exercise was in New Zealand. So it was a great way really of getting established within the squadron itself, if that makes sense. And the good, just to allude to it there, I went on selection as a sergeant, and then once you finish selection, you lose you lose all that rank and you're back down to trooper again. So it was a bit of a shock to the system to having quite a lot of responsibility as a sergeant. And then suddenly you're new in the troop, so you're now the radio operator, because that's the first course you get sent on is doing communications and Morse code and stuff like that. And then suddenly you're in charge of the tea urn,
Yeah.
picking the tea urn or the coffee, or picking the sugar up. So it's a bit of a culture shock, but actually a good culture shock, because everybody is exactly the same. So there's no egos about rank, stuff like that, because everybody loses it, and you basically start from the bottom again. So it was good.
Interesting. I think when before you came on the podcast and I looked at your background, myself having an intelligence background, I was mainly interested in the covert side of the work that you were doing. To your time, go through training and then you go on different deployments. Could you talk a little bit about your time in Northern Ireland? Because there's a lot of that in the media about it. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I first went to Northern Ireland, it was in my commando days, and we were based in South Armagh, and for some reason, the young military boys in the normal Green Army, you have this. It's sort of embedded in you that the Catholics are the bad people, and the Protestants are the good people, which is a completely false narrative. And the reason being is there are good and bad on either side. That makes sense. And we saw that when we went to Bosnia. There are bad Serbs, there are good Serbs, there are bad Muslims, there are good Muslims. So so Northern Ireland was a bit of a culture shock. So when I went to Northern Ireland within the SAS, I actually went undercover. I actually volunteered to do the 14 intelligence, as it was called then. Which is a 6-month course, and for SAS people doing it, you put yourself on a bit of a pedestal, if that makes sense. Ready to be knocked off, because it's not. Surveillance is not our bread and butter. SAS soldiers generally are quite aggressive, and probably not suited to the surveillance world, where you've actually got to take a step back somewhat. So on the course itself, when I volunteered to do the course, when we were doing all the training exercises, I actually thought I'd failed the course, because every time because at the end of a serial that you do, when you're training, the target will come in, and you'll get a debriefing from the target. And he'll allude to what he actually saw, and every 2 minutes it was, yeah, Mick, I saw you doing this, I saw you do that, and oh, Mick. And at the end of it, I would look around the room and think, am I the only one working?
Yeah.
was I the only one doing something?
Yeah.
Anyway, this went on for months. It's a 6-month course. And at the end of the course, they whittle it right down, and I think there was again about 14 of us that passed out of 100 and some people that have volunteered. And I got called in by the training major to have a debrief. And the first words I said to him were, "I'm actually shocked to have passed." And he went, "Why?" He said, "Why is that?" I said, "Well, obviously my surveillance skills are not brilliant because the target kept seeing me." But his words actually resonated quite well. He said, "Mick, we're actually training here to go to Northern Ireland, and people like yourself who are getting stuck in all the time, when you go to places like Northern Ireland, in the real dangerous parts of the cities or whatever, you can actually rein yourself back." He said, "There's some people that are pass the course here that don't get stuck in, and if you're not willing to get stuck in on training in a sort of friendly environment, Hereford, if you class Hereford as friendly,
Yeah.
You're very unlikely to get stuck in when it comes to the hard terrorist estates, the hardcore estates like the Ardoyne for the Catholic side of it, or the Shankill Road for the Protestants." And that really resonated with me, if that makes sense, because I then went across and joined one of the debts. At the time, there was 4 different detachments. There was an area that did South Armagh, 2 that actually did Belfast, because obviously Belfast is the main area, and another detachment that was predominantly for Londonderry, or Derry as the Catholics called it. And I was fortunate enough to get Belfast. Well, we were province wide, but we ended up doing a lot of work in Belfast. So I got to know Belfast like the back of my hand. I know Belfast better than I know Hereford, probably, if that makes sense. So enjoyable time, very successful. We had quite a few operations against both Catholic and Protestant. Just to allude to that, it wasn't all about catching the IRA. It was all about, if you're a bad person, you were gonna get it.
Sure.
As opposed, regardless of what side you were on, there's bad people on either side. So we had a really successful 18 months tour, and fully engrossed on it. And I thoroughly enjoyed the getting stuck in, and I had exactly the same mentality in Belfast, working these hard areas and against bad people, as I did do when I was going through training, and it was true, because I found that some of the people that I was working with were a bit less inclined to get out of the vehicle and walk behind bad people at night time into their estates, if that makes sense. So that debrief that I got off the training major really came back to resonate.
It's super interesting, because there's just not that much information about 14 signals.
No, no, absolutely. And to be honest, because 4 SAS guys always volunteer to do each course, and the reason being is it's a fantastic skill to have, to have surveillance and all that, along with your SAS background, is actually quite a good skill to have. But you do put yourself on a pedestal, because if you fail, you go back to the SAS having failed the 14 in course, and sometimes that can be seen in a bit of a dark side, if that makes sense. And generally, we've had people that have failed surveillance, for instance, because surveillance is not everybody's cup of tea. You can either do surveillance or you can't. There's no middle ground, if that makes sense. But on the other skills, so there's 3 main skills that you have to, 4 main skills really: driving, navigating, and communicating all at the same time, which is a bit of an art. Close target recce, CTR, so where you actually go out, break into houses, break into farms, stuff like that, covertly, to put either fit cameras in or set up a surveillance serial. And then the final one, CQB, close quarter battle, pistol work, predominantly pistol work. So if you fail CQB, close quarter battle, pistol, to be honest,
that's an SAS.
Yeah, you shouldn't be in the SAS, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's the same as CTR, close target recce. That is our bread and butter. Breaking into covertly into houses and farms and stuff. That is an SAS soldier's bread and butter. So if you was to fail, them two things and then went back to the SAS, you'd never live it down, if that makes sense. But if you failed surveillance, although you'd be looked upon as being a bit of a numpty for failing it, it's not as bad as failing them other two, if that makes sense. So we were lucky. There was four of us went on the course, and actually all four of us passed, if that makes sense. So although there was going to be five of us on the course, but what they do is we do a little 2-week introduction to what it's like doing the fighting in course. And one of the guys was an ex-paratrooper who had no inclination of sitting down and listening to 14 these intelligence people, and that was picked up quite early that he probably is not best suited to go on the course. So they withdrew him. The four of us that were deemed acceptable to go on the course, we went on it, and away you go. And the art really of going on someone else's course is treating it's their toy. So let them, you just go along and you just take in all the information. Never rock the boat, just let them get on with it. Because believe you me, there's a lot of things on the course that we would quite easily say, no, I'm not happy with that. All that would do is cause animosity, and they would probably look at you in a different light, because when you actually go to Northern Ireland, you're actually working with working in small detachments, and the last thing you want to be is a person that rocks the boat, if that makes sense. So it's having the gumption really, and the personality to be able to suck in the information, and get rid of the stuff you think rubbish, but without telling them, if that. And then just getting across and doing your thing, and then your SAS background can then come to the fore when you're actually on live operations. When you're actually dealing with hardcore terrorists. Your personality can come out more, if that makes sense. And that aggressive military stance that you had before, that you had to wind in while you're on the course, you could release that, and it went really well. And I must confess, I thoroughly enjoyed the job, if that makes sense. I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the people, if that makes, because it's a different mentality. An SAS trooper or an SAS soldier is totally different to an intelligence type individual. They're chalk and cheese. But the main aim is to sort the bad people out, sort the terrorists out. So it's a common goal, and how you get there is just using the different personalities. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great skill. Absolutely loved Northern Ireland. Loved the people. The most friendly people you'll ever come across, and so my preconceived thoughts about Northern Ireland when I went as Green Army in my commando days totally changed when I went undercover, because you're actually meeting people. Yeah, because these people they have no idea who you are. So even though I've got long blonde hair, big gold earring, my pirate earring, you know, looking a bit dodgy, but I didn't look like a military guy. And to be honest, I spoke English. I never ever tried to put on a Belfast accent, and the reason being is they would see through that instantly. You know, if an English guy tries to speak with a Belfast accent, people in Belfast would think, "Why are you trying to speak, you know, Belfast when we know you're English?" So I used to speak with an English accent, right, mate? Yeah. And the reason being is you had Queen's University, and there were a lot of British nationals in Northern Ireland, civilians, doing normal work. So my undercover type thing was I was a chippy, you know, and I had lots of bits of wood in my car. You know, my jeans were all cut, you know, shredded. Sometimes I would get out with a you know, a carpenter's belt on, you know, just to look the part, and you know, knocking on people's doors to get a bit of intelligence, but you know, on the pretense that you were a chippy looking for a certain house, if that makes sense. So yeah, it was good, but I probably left at the right time, because just they were thinking about putting tracking devices in cars, so that the people could monitor where you were. And I wouldn't say I specialised it, but I was a bit of a black sheep, so a bit of a rogue, if that makes sense. And if we needed to do, for instance, I'll just allude to a story. We were due to do a close target recce on a house that we thought was going to be empty, and we've been asking Special Branch in Belfast to confirm that this house was going to be empty, and they said, yep, empty house. So that night, two of us were going to be breaking into this house. So anyway, because I just happened to be in Belfast at the time on a surveillance serial, I just thought, I'll tell you what, let's just. So I sort of cleared away, pretended I was doing something else, and then knocked on the door of the target house, and shock horror, one of our targets opened the door, and thankfully I had a clipboard in my hand, and I said, "Listen, is this number 25 Cairn Avenue or something like that?" And actually Cairn Avenue was the road behind, and the guy went, "No," you know, really grumpy old typical Belfast, you know, "No, it's the road behind." "Oh, okay, cheers, thanks," and off I went. Now I couldn't. So I then reported, "Listen, I've just driven past and I've just seen the door up," because I couldn't actually say
that you did.
"Listen, I've just knocked on the door," because that's not what normal people do.
No,
if that makes sense.
Sure.
But it achieved the aim, because we then realised that actually, and there was 3 people living in the house. Now we would have broken into that house that night, and we could have been compromised quite easily. So with the new information that's surprising, you know, it just happened to occur as I was driving by, we put off the CTR until a later date, if that makes sense. But I actually gave the Special Branch a bit of a hard time, because we've been saying to them, you know, "Can you confirm?" Yeah, it's empty. And actually it wasn't empty. You know, they never actually went round and knocked on the door. They just assumed it was empty. So in a way, having that rogue operator does come in, and that's not the first time I've done that. I've done that quite a few times. Goes against everything you're taught to do, doing covert surveillance. But sometimes, you know what? Yeah, you need that sort of rogue element to go and find out.
Creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I did it with MI5 as well in London, and it was more of a big issue with them, because the MI5 were very stuck in their ways, if that makes sense, and and having this sort of rogue military guy going in. And another story was it was a big office complex, and they were following. We were following an Algerian known terrorist, and he'd set up an office, but they weren't sure that there'd been no sighting of the individual. So again, I just took the bull by the horns and went into the office complex, knocked on the office door, and the door opened, and it was a cleaner, and she was actually cleaning the office because the office was empty. So I then had to go back to the team leader, who's a career MI5 operator, and said, "Listen, I've just knocked on the door, and that terrorist is no longer there." And he went flipping out, and it put him in a position, because how could he now report this back to the head of MI5 that this lunatic from the British Army, from the SAS, has just knocked on the terrorist door and found that they've actually moved. So we again, he had to come up with something creative. Otherwise, what would have happened? Would have spent the next 2 weeks probably putting and with MI5, but they're big teams. It's not one or two individuals. You're talking big surveillance teams, and it's a lot of man hours, a lot of effort going into doing what, looking at an empty building. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but you just take your chances, if that makes sense. So for me, I was quite lucky. Most of the things we did, it paid off.
Yeah, and I'm interested in your work with MI5, but I wanted to also talk to you about, you mentioned Bosnia. That I've been there many times. Very interesting place. And what was the work like there?
Yeah, well, it's funny because straight after they 2 years in Northern Ireland, or 18 months in Northern Ireland, it's when it's a 2-year posting, so 6 month training, and then you're 18 months in Northern. So I had really long hair. My hair was actually on my shoulders, quite long. And then I went back to the squadron, and then all of a sudden, you shave all your head off, and we were deploying to Bosnia, because it was our rotation. So we went, and so I missed all the build up to it. So the team had already deployed, and I actually went to a place called Bihać, which is on the western side, of Bosnia, and it's a little enclave, a Muslim enclave, that actually held out during the war itself, and the reason being is they had a very good Muslim general called General Dedarkovic, and it was 5 Corps, the Muslim 5 Corps, so they were quite hardcore individuals, and the Serbs just couldn't break through at all, if that makes sense. And so that was the area that we were going to be operating, and we went there as a 4-man team. So I joined late, so flew into Split initially, which is down the south of the country in Croatia, and then got a local flight up to Zagreb, and then I was picked up by one of the lads, came up in a Land Rover, picked me up, and then we drove across the border into Bosnia. And to Bihać, and I had a great time. But obviously, one of the team members is quite well known. A guy called Billy Billingham, who was actually quite a young lad, and we had an incident where, as a team, we had to set up, because we were working with the UN. We came under the UN banner, although we never used to wear UN berets and all that. We never wore any of that stuff, because we just found it was quite restrictive. Because if you're working for the UN, they have their hands tied quite a lot, so they can't. So we used to do away with that typical SAS mentality. That ignore that. Let's just get on with it. And it worked really well because all our intelligence that we were getting bypassed the UN and actually went straight down to the General Smith or General Jackson or whoever the general was down in Sarajevo at the time. So he had these pockets of SAS guys all around Bosnia, getting intelligence and sending it straight back to him. So it was fantastic for him, and a bit of a bummer for the UN because we just used to ignore. We'd give them little snippets of information, but not, some of the stuff that we needed to send back. We would just bypass them, which did annoy the UN somewhat because we were working with a Danish UN organisation. And although we used to do a briefing in the morning, we were very reluctant as to, tell them what we were actually doing, if that makes sense. So, but on this one occasion, we were setting up a meeting between two generals, Muslim general, General Dedarkovic, and a Serb general. And it was a meeting in no man's land between the Serb front line and the Muslim front line. And me and Billy decided to set the meeting up. But there's four of us, so two of the lads stayed where the meeting was. And me and Billy decided to walk down and have a chat with the Serb front line soldiers. And as we went down there, obviously because we didn't have UN equipment on, they put two and two together and thought we were a bit too strange. So actually took us prisoner. Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And because we only had sidearms, we only had pistols, so there's not a lot you can really do when 8 or 9 Serbs are, pointing AK-47s at you. There's not a lot you can do about it. So fair cop, they took us prisoner, took us into a building ready to do an initial, who are you, what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And then decided that me and Billy were going to be taken 45 minutes down the road to a place called Prijedor to an interrogation site. And the interrogation site was actually on the news because it's where they used to starve all the Muslim prisoners. And it was on the news that, these really skinny, starving individuals. So that's a camp that they took us to. And I fortunately, I think I was the first one anyway to get dragged in for interrogation. And because I'd just come back from Northern Ireland, I knew roughly what a cover story was. So, I literally said, I told them the truth. I'd only been there 2 weeks. And then my lie was, I said, listen, I'm just a driver. I know nothing. And that was it. That's all I gave them, nothing else. So they threw me in the corridor, bit of intimidation in the corridor, stuff like that. But then Billy got dragged in for interrogation. Now, Billy had been on the build-up to go in there, so he'd done the full package, but also been on a 6-week Serbo-Croat course. So learnt a bit of the language and made the fatal mistake, really, of trying to speak Serbo-Croat to the interrogator. And they put 2 and 2 together and thought, he's the clever one, and Mr. Thicky outside the driver is a non-entity. So they concentrated on Billy. Now, Billy got dragged in and out about 4 or 5 times for interrogation, whereas I just got left in the corridor. I was getting a bit of a shoe-in. They were giving you a bit of a kick-in and, poking AKs or your bayonet in your ribs, but nothing untoward, if that makes sense. A bit of a, unfortunately, you expect that sort of treatment, if that makes sense. So, whereas Billy was getting dragged in and out, and after about 4 hours, we ended up fairly close together in the corridor, and sort of Billy sort of reached over and said, "Flipping hell, mate," he said, "what did you actually tell them?" I said, "Well, unfortunately, mate, I just said I've only been here 2 weeks and that I'm just a driver." And he went, "Yeah, but I'm the driver." And it was that typical SAS humour.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate, but snooze you lose.
Yeah.
I was in there first, so I'm copping it. But I did say, listen, whatever you're saying, you're speaking too much. You're obviously talking too much, which he understood actually that he probably shouldn't have been talking as much as what he did, if that makes sense. But anyway, so the way it all got resolved was the two other lads that were left behind. They realised that the Serbs had actually captured us, so they got on the sat phone to our general down in Sarajevo, who said instantly, "Go into the meeting now. Stop the meeting," which annoyed the UN again. Go into the meeting, arrest the Serb general, and tell him that if he doesn't get our people released now, he's going to be taken back to Bihać. And as soon as that was mentioned to the Serb general, he absolutely pooped his pants, because the thought of a Serb general going back to a Muslim enclave didn't go down well. So they gave him a sat phone. He then got us released. About an hour and a half later, we ended up, back with the rest of the guys, if that makes sense.
Was there any consequences for you guys just being there?
No, not at all. And actually, it was, for us, it wasn't a big issue. You get captured, but, hey, we're in the SAS, just get on with it. So we kept it very low key. We didn't make a song and dance about it. We didn't make a big major. It wasn't a drama, if that makes sense. And actually, a few years later, so when Billy became famous on TV doing the Who Dares Wins, he alluded to the fact that he'd been captured in Bosnia. And a lot of the B Squadron lads, a lot of the B Squadron people who were actually serving with us at the time, all rang him up and said, what was this? You've never been captured. And he went, actually, go and ask Mick Hawks, but actually, we was captured. So that just goes to prove, and I had a chat actually with my two lads who were serving, and they said, flipping hell, Dad, but if that was to happen now, it would be classed as a big issue. But for us at the time, it was just, yes, you got captured. It was our fault. We obviously didn't understand the situation where when they brought us, because we went down for a chat with the Serbs the day before, and it was just local troops. But when they brought the Serb general up, they brought their special forces forward, and that actually spooked them, if that makes sense. So not wearing. And the other thing about the UN is that they always used to wear, the ballistic helmets and also
the blue vests.
Bulletproof vests and stuff like that. We never, ever did that. And the reason being is kudos. So when you're actually speaking to the frontline troops, none of them have got body armor. They haven't got ballistic helmets. So trying to get intelligence from people dressed up like RoboCop was never going to work. So we kept it very, very low key, and just said, all right, guys, I just got on with it. You know what I mean? Without looking as if we were UN. Although officially we were UN. But we certainly didn't look like UN, and it had its benefits because we could do things that the UN could never do. The UN was so restrictive, to the extent that me and Billy came across 6 vehicles, warrior vehicles, which were big armored personnel carriers, with rod and cannons on the top. So it's not a tank, but it's an intimidating piece of equipment. And these 6, they were from the light infantry. But anyway, they were being held up at a checkpoint by 2 fairly rag and bone Serbian soldiers that had 2 big oil drums and a massive log. And they were stopping the warrior vehicles from getting up to go and have a look at, and what it was there was a report of dead bodies at the top, and we wanted to go anyway. So we turned up in a little crappy old Land Rover, because that's all we use. Nothing special. We turned up in a Land Rover. Stopped and had a chat with the light infantry. Said, "Listen, what's going on?" And they said, "Oh, we can't go up there because the Serb checkpoint here says we're not allowed up there." And me and Billy just looked at each other and went, "What the hell?" Follow us.
Yeah.
And literally, we walked over there, kicked the oil drums to one side, threatened the two Serbs to, get out the way, drove up in our little Land Rover, and these big six, Warrior vehicles coming up behind us, and to be honest, the Warrior vehicles had been there a day and a half, and I just couldn't, that really just summed up for me the ineffectiveness of the UN, if that makes sense, and I'm so glad that we didn't follow their mandate. Although in theory, we should have done. But you can't operate. You can't operate in a theatre where your hands are tied. You just gotta go. And that again, that's the good thing about the SAS. They're able to adapt and just get on with it. If that makes sense.
I mean, the motto is "Who dares wins," right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people keep saying to me, who are the best special forces in the world? And I always refer back. It's a difficult question because I've worked with Delta over in America, and I know some of the SEAL teams are pretty on the ball, but none of them really have the diversity of what the SAS do. And I allude to. So I was on the anti-terrorist team. And then I went to do Northern Ireland. So you're in black kit 1 minute, you're in Northern Ireland doing undercover stuff with long hair. You come back from that, shave your hair off, and then you're over in Bosnia doing green stuff. So the diversity of the individual, you have to be able to drop an SAS guy into any environment, and for that individual just to get on with it, if that makes sense, and that really makes the SAS side of it quite unique, to be honest.
Is that because general SAS culture, or is it also because you don't really have the means and the tools that the Americans may have?
Yeah, I think you alluded to it there, the culture. A lot. Yeah, I think going through the 6 months training, and then realizing that we're no longer part of the Green, although officially we're still Green Army, but a lot of the stuff we do is actually totally off the radar, if that makes sense, and it needs individuals that are willing to push a boundary, and not get bogged down with stuff that you would normally do in the Green Army. Sometimes you just got to go above and beyond with what you're being paid. To actually carry out the job, if that makes sense, and SAS guys are very adept at doing that. Purely because bizarrely, SAS guys are actually quite intelligent individuals. And in their own right, they're not professors and stuff like that. But
no. But
you ask
you
them
must be.
Yeah.
to survive, that and to pass selection.
Yeah,
I don't think you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's it's got the mentality of the individual and the robust nature of that individual. Normally defeats any negativity that comes your way. You just you find a way around it.
When you went back as an instructor to Hereford, when was that? In what year?
Yeah, so that was really my final 2 years, really, because I when I finished my MI5 2 years with MI5, I only had 2 years left. So they said, "Listen, mate, do you fancy going down and being an instructor?" Because it was in Hereford, So perfect really for doing, all your bits and bobs that you need to do before you leave the military. And I was in charge of the CQB cell, and the close quarter battle cell is actually quite an interesting job, because again, we're not bound by all the normal limitations as you do, and bear in mind that you're taking 14 intelligence people up to an SAS standard shooter. So the learning curve for these individuals is like that. So not only are you learning how to shoot a pistol, but you're also doing different scenarios where quite dangerous actually on the range. And we had because we always video all the different scenarios, because if there's it's a good learning curve really. And we had an incident where we had a female girl was on the range, and the range practice is where you've got two people on the same side of the street firing down the street. So one person is low and one person's sort of higher up. So one's kneeling and one's standing, and and literally you're firing over the head of the other individual. So there's a set drill that you have to understand to allow that to happen safely. And unfortunately, and it was a parachute regiment sergeant from a parachute regiment who completely cocked it up. But literally, instead of making eye contact with the girl who was firing over the top, he literally stood up just as she fired, and he had quite long blonde hair. And when we checked the video footage afterwards, you could see the hair parting as the bullet went straight over the top of his head. But it was fantastic, because we decided that this was too good an opportunity
not to show
to miss. So we got the whole course, because what happens is that the course gets split into three different. One does surveillance, one does CTR, close target recce, and one does CQB. So when we finished it, we had a chat with the chief instructor, who's an SAS guy anyway, and we explained what had happened. And he said, "Listen, let's get everybody in the cinema and show them the video footage." And we showed it to them, and the shock of people actually seeing that this bullet in slow motion part this guy's head just as he was standing up. So a split second later, he would have stood up and got shot in the back of the head. Very, very lucky individual. But the learning curve for us was when we do all our shooting, we're actually quite a laid back. We were quite a laid back. There's two SAS guys that ran the cell, and we're actually quite laid back in our approach. Whereas when they're doing surveillance, it's all very strict. And it's the same as when they're doing close target recce and their cell, they're all quite strict. So when they come to us, it's all, we're pretty chilled out, if that makes sense. We're deadly serious, but fairly chilled out. And what we alluded to was, you make a mistake on CTR, or you make a mistake on the surveillance, nothing will happen. You just get a slap on the wrist. You make a mistake where we are, you're going to end up dead, which is what nearly happened with this individual. Because the learning curve for these people, I mean, they're normal Green Army soldiers, and then all of a sudden they're having to do range work that even SAS troopers, struggle with, if that makes sense. So their learning curve was absolutely sky high. And we used to do a lot of situational awareness type stuff, which is what they would come across in Northern Ireland. So remember what I said at the very start, was a lot of our training was as if you're actually doing it for real. So you're having to get these people to a very high standard of confidence with their pistols, including some of the females. And I must admit, some of the female operators very, very good that came through. There's never enough of them, but they're actually very good at what they do. And I'm not a big fan of people pushing to get females to join the SAS, because they don't need to join the SAS. They don't need to put themselves under that pressure, because if the SAS do an operation and they need females, they'll just go over to, the surveillance organisation, the Surveillance and Reconnaissance Regiment, as it's called now. And they would go over and they would borrow. They'll say, "Listen, could we borrow a couple of your females just to do a job?" Because they're very competent at what they do. So why put added pressure on an individual female to try and pass SAS selection, which to be honest is not really geared towards females anyway. It's if a really fit paratrooper fails SAS selection, what chance really of a female passing it, if that makes sense physically? And that's just trying to be realistic, if that makes sense. So there's no need for it. Let them just continue doing the surveillance stuff, because their course is very good and it gets them to a quite a high standard anyway. And if the SAS need them, they just go bore them. And to be honest, the girls actually quite enjoy coming across and doing the odd job with the SAS, because it's different. It's different, so.
Yeah. So I wasn't aware that when you went to MI5, you were still in the SAS. So I thought it was after your time.
Yeah, no. At the time, the SAS had individuals that would go, because we were surveillance trained anyway from Northern Ireland. So you would go down there and really just to give MI5 a hand, because we're full on, our surveillance is slightly different, because we're much more aware of third party influence, if that may, or awareness, because all the places that we operate are in bad estates in Northern Ireland, whereas MI5, they're operating in places like London, where your third party awareness is maybe not so important, because if you get it wrong in Northern Ireland, you could either get yourself killed or another individual killed. And that's why once you come in off the ground, say you've been in the Ardoyne or the markets, which are real high-core areas of Belfast, very predominantly IRA supported. When you come in off the ground, you have to be absolutely honest with people. And if someone says, Mick, do you think you got noticed? If you try and bluff it and say, "No, I'm okay," the next day somebody may go out there from another team and be in that area. And because I lied and said, "No one saw me, I'm really good at surveillance," they could be ambushed and could be killed. So when you go back, it's got to be 100% honesty. Now, I ended up, if you're blown, if you think that you've been blown, you think that somebody may have recognised you as being a surveillance operator, then you have to be honest and open with them and say, "Yeah, I think I was blown." Now, unfortunately, I told you earlier on that I was actually quite aggressive, so I used to get blown quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I used to end up in the helicopter, because you've got a helicopter over Belfast, and we had big cameras in it. When you do a lot of the surveillance, you're actually using the helicopter because it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier for the team on the ground to have a helicopter initially take the. So I ended up as a bit of an expert in the helicopter, because I ended up doing a lot of my time really in the helicopter, purely the fact that I was blown, and the rest of the team used to love it. Who's in the helicopter today? Mick. Mick's not allowed on the ground just yet, because you have to change your appearance. If you get blown, if you've got long blonde hair, you've either got to dye it or change the style, or start wearing glasses, or doing something. And all the clothes that you actually wore instantly get thrown into a bin and burnt. And the reason for that is it stops the temptation of you, I like that top, put it back on again, and somebody actually recognising the top rather than the individual. If that makes sense. So it's doing surveillance is a thing that you have to be really honest, because, like I say, in Northern Ireland, you get it wrong there, you're going to get people killed. London, MI5, slightly different. That third party awareness is not quite the same in London. So, and we used to operate up in Liverpool, Manchester, wherever that they felt. And actually at the time we were doing a lot of work on Russians, because it was the old. And Russians at the time, they used to like going to car boot sales, on a Sunday. So you'd have an MI5 surveillance team going out and following Russians all around the Kent coastline, doing, it was just bizarre. I enjoyed it, to be honest. Not for me, not for me at all. I like to follow terrorists, knowing that there's going to be an end game at the end of it. With MI5, they're following targets that this could be a long-term operation. No, not for me. So, soon as I left the military, the surveillance side of it, not interested. I actually found it, unless you're actually following a terrorist that's got a weapon, I find it quite boring, if that makes sense. So, not for me.
Well, no, listening to your story, it makes a lot of sense, since you don't like to sit back and wait. So, how does then after all of that, after your private sector work, how then does the Hawks & Co. come about, and the focus on like school safety and rural safety, these type of things?
Yeah, it's funny because I, having all that military experience and working in little teams, we know how to stay safe in bad places. So it's so we know that we can help the general public to stay safe. Having that SAS sort of mentality. So initially we started Hawks & Co. To help children. Youngsters, because night crime is just off the charts at the moment. So teaching kids all the pitfalls on the streets, and then giving them the confidence and the skills really to deal with confrontation and stuff like that. A lot of it is all about keeping yourself out of trouble, which is where the situational awareness really comes into its own. But ultimately, that can only get you so far. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're going to have a confrontation. So it's also making sure that kids have got the confidence to deal with confrontation. So we took that to another level by bringing in my daughter, really, to assist. Because, like I say, kids, women, especially, they relate to my daughter more. So that gave us a bit of an advantage, really, over other teams, because it's quite unusual to have a father-daughter training team, if that makes sense. So I did the scary bit of telling them why they need to be that. I think my daughter would do the physical side of it, and that works well. So we've done corporate companies. I personally also teach active shooter or maraudering terrorist attacks. And the reason being is Martin's Law that is supposed to be coming out because of Manchester 7 years ago has still not actually come to fruition. So in that 7 years, I've been all around the world teaching active shooter. So if a guy walks into the office with a weapon, how do you deal with it? Now, we do it. We don't follow police guidelines at all, because all the police training when they're dealing with this is all about having a police response at the end of it. So realistically, a terrorist incident is going to be done and dusted and finished before any police force gets there. So our mentality is run, hide, fight. The same as they do in America, whereas over here it's run, hide, tell. So ring people up, blah blah blah. You haven't got time for that. So we slightly run it slightly different. So I've been over to America quite within the last 18 months to teach active shooter. So we offer that. So we're actually quite a niche training thing. And the reason being is I used to deal with these security companies that do training all around the world. And that's having been through that experience, watching these security companies, the way they operate. We just wanted to do something different. So we're very hands-on. We're very personal. We will actually go into a school. And so recently, 2 weeks ago, we were in Aldershot, and it was for children that had learning difficulties, couldn't be put into mainstream schooling. Very disruptive individuals, very, they come out with some strange behaviour, but in general, they were good kids, but they were vulnerable. And the vulnerability comes actually when they're on the streets, as opposed to in the school. So when I sat down with the headmistress initially, Mean Keeley, she said, "Listen, mate, just be aware that the kids may shout something, or they may throw something, or they may be disruptive." And because we had two lessons to give, and I said, "Listen, if you can sit there and teach SAS troops, teaching kids like this is actually a walk in the park." And actually it was, and to be honest, it was just good fun. But then the teachers came up afterwards and said, "Mick, can you teach us the same, but add the restraint training? So how to deal with the kids? They become quite aggressive, because what the government has done, and what schools generally do, is they do a restraint trainings syllabus that is not hands-on. It's all about trying to and what the teachers alluded to was actually some of the teachers have been hurt by because some of these kids are 16 years of age and actually quite big, powerful lads, if that makes sense. And you only saw recently down in Wales a 13-year-old girl with a knife, intent on killing people. So we don't do woke. So our training mentality is, if an individual has every intention of harming another individual, then believe you me, he's going to get hurt, or she's going to get hurt, the way we teach it, if that makes sense, because there's no woke will get people hurt. And that's what the teachers wanted. They said, "Listen, Mick, can you teach us how to deal with it?" And so we're going to go down there on the 7th of May to redo the teachers, and it's during the bank holiday, so the kids are not in the school. So what we tend to do different is we will listen to the client, and you tell me what you want. We'll then develop a training syllabus that you will benefit you, because a lot of security companies, what they'll do is they will teach things that they assume that the client wants, but actually is totally irrelevant, and not really fit for purpose, if that makes sense. So having seen that done, using all that experience that we've got now, is we're just trying to be slightly different, which is also why we really got into the rural crime side of it, because I actually live on a farm here in Herefordshire, and bearing in mind that I used to break into farms in my SAS days, so I know what criminals are doing. So it's the old poacher turned gamekeeper. But what we're trying to do with the farm industry is not state the obvious, and the obvious really is people assume that CCTV. If you buy CCTV, that's going to end all your problems. It doesn't. CCTV and technical security, physical security stuff is only as good as the individuals that are operating it. Otherwise, it's a waste of money. So you've got the rural crime units doing their thing. Bear in mind that they're a very small number of people, covering a massive area. So each county has got their own rural crime units. Realistically, you're talking about 8 people. So 4 people on the ground, and I'm just trying to be realistic. Probably not working late at night. It's probably a daytime operation. So when the criminals operate, 2 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the morning is their main. Yeah, absolutely. So, and because they know that the rural crime units are not going to be operating. So what we're trying to do is change the mindset. Remember, 15 years working in high risk countries, put a security culture in place will benefit the company. If we can do that to the farmers and the farm industry, they will benefit. But it's quite difficult because a lot of the farmers are quite old, very set in their ways, so very reluctant to change their mentality of how they deal with it. So our point being is we really need to be going into agricultural colleges, getting the really young farmers from an early age and getting them into such a mindset where security becomes second nature. They don't even have to think about it because it's a bit like military people. When we're walking down the street, we're observing a lot more than what a normal civilian would be doing. To the extent we're still looking for the sniper in the window. Slight exaggeration, but that sort of mentality. So if we can get the farmers to start thinking security so that it becomes second nature. So really it's not putting them out their way because what they're doing it second nature anyway. And that's how you sort of embed a security culture. Because the weak link in any farm industry, any farm security is always the farmers themselves. It's not the rural crime units because they're doing their bit. CCTV, technical and the physical security things are doing their thing. The weak link will always be the farmers. And until the National Farming Union accept that, nothing will ever change. And when you think last year it was 52 million, I think. But that's only a small percentage. That's only 2/3 of the insurance company that's reported that. If you think the other third, so that 52 will go up to about 70 odd. And then you look at all the non-reported rural crime, that'll push that figure up to about 100 million. Now that's not sustainable over a set time. So rural crime is actually the scourge of the farming industry at the moment and needs to be dealt with. So we've got a different angle. On the 7th of June, we're going down to Wiltshire because we've been invited down there by a crime commissioner who happens to be an ex-military guy. He likes and understands where we're coming from. So he's asked us to do a presentation on security culture because he knows that is the weak link, and it's not what the rural crime units can teach, and it's certainly not what anyone else can teach. It's a bit of a niche thing that we're trying to get across. So hopefully, we'll keep banging the drum. We'll keep harping on them there because, like I say, I know how to break into farms and everything else, but if the farmers understand that as well, it's having that mentality of knowing how your enemy operate, i.e. how the criminals operate, and if you understand that, then you're in a better position to try and defeat against it. If that makes sense. So it's changing culture, but we also do a lot on
Speak 510. Go to the Bluetooth menu on your smartphone and select it from the list.
We do a lot of niche training, different training. So kidnap and ransom, for instance, is another thing that we offer. And the reason being is I used to write kidnap and ransom plans for major companies all around the world. I've actually been taken, so me and Billy getting captured, but I've also been on the other side of it, on the anti-terrorist team, doing a hostage rescue. So we've seen, what it's like being at that end, but also what it's like being at that end and everything in between. So we've actually got quite a lot of experience on the kidnap side of it. So and a lot of these companies don't have K&R insurance, kidnap and ransom insurance, which actually can be quite expensive, to be honest. Now we know for a fact that companies out there don't have K&R. They'll send their people all around the world, but they don't have K&R insurance. So if they do get somebody kidnapped, they need somebody like me to come in there to help them, because if you haven't got K&R insurance, the big K&R companies like Control Risk won't touch you with a baseball. So it needs people like me that understand it all, that can come in there and help individuals. So, the main thing is teaching, the personal safety situational awareness training, getting into the rural farm thing, but there's a massive amount of niche type stuff that we've picked up over the years as well. If that makes sense. So yeah, we're small and we're family orientated. It's me and my daughter. Hopefully, the 3 boys can help when they leave the military. If your name's not Hawks, obviously you can't join Hawks and Co. But yeah, we're trying to keep it very personal, rather than, But this was my aim. My aim was to hand everything over to my daughter and to my kids to say, you now run it. And that came from that light bulb moment 2 years ago. Writing the book, starting a security company. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get there. We will get there.
Fascinating. Yeah, for sure. No. If your energy and your knowledge is any indication, you definitely will get there. What I wanted to ask you, something we ask everybody that comes on the podcast, is if you're starting out today, like your boys, for example, they're a bit younger, like what advice would you give them if they're interested in the pathway that you have taken? Going to special forces.
Yeah, it's funny because the military's changing all the time. I joined in an area where, it was you joined the military because you wanted to join, if that makes sense. And whereas the military now is going through a bit of a turn of events where people don't enjoy joining the military anymore, because everything's been hammered. Pensions are not quite the same as they used to be. Retention in the military is not like it used to be. People join for 3 years and then leave. So trying to, and also the recruiting thing is such a long process. So in effect, I probably now would advise them against joining the military. And find another route, because until the military get their act together, and when I mean the military, I mean the Ministry of Defence, they need to get their act together to make the military more attractive to these young people. And bearing in mind that the core of the British military are individuals that live on the hard industrial estates up and down the country. That's where the core of the British Army come from. People that don't have a massive education, but are excited by the fact that they want to jump out of aeroplanes or be a Royal Marine Commando and stuff like that. But even now, the Parachute Regiment and the Royal Marine, even their recruiting is on the wane. Yeah, so for me, probably not join the military until the MOD and the government or successive governments start to make it more attractive, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's a very honest answer. I don't think many people would have said that, but I appreciate it.
No, absolutely.
If I've learned anything, is that you're a straight shooter, so I appreciate you saying that. last question. Do you have any cultural recommendations, something you're enjoying, that you're reading or that you're watching or that you're listening to?
Yeah, because I love history. I love anything to do with spies. So when I'm looking at Netflix, I automatically go through trying to find any sort of spy movie and stuff like that, or a day. But I'm also really interested in the conflict in Northern Ireland, and the reason being is, we were there and stuff like that. So I do a lot of reading really on different people's takes on all that, because people. It's the same as when me and Billy, when we got captured, we were sat in a pub not that long ago, having a few glasses of wine, catching up, and his side of the story is slightly different to my side of the story, because so reading people's books about their side of Northern Ireland compared to what I remember, I actually find quite interesting. So yeah. Any documentaries on the military.
Do you have any particular ones that you recommend that you're watching maybe right now?
Yeah, well, my book-wise, my all-time classic favourite book was I think called Legionnaire, and it was about a guy called Simon Murray who joined the French Foreign Legion way back in 1960, I think it was. But I actually found the book quite inspirational because it was an individual who was quite well-to-do. If he'd have joined the British Army, he would have been an officer, but decided to do something completely different, completely off the grid, and put him through training, if that makes sense. And off he went. Funny story. My eldest lad was parachute regiment, and he joined because he's got a degree. He wanted to join the Paras as an officer. So he went through the system, and what they said to him at the end was, all you've done is school, college, and university. Go away, come back in 18 months' time, and just get a better life experience. And you look around and think, Hereford, where am I going to get a better life experience in Hereford? So I said, listen, forget that. Go and follow your brother, because his brother is parachute regiment. I said, go and follow your brother, join as a normal Tom, normal private, and then your 18-month experience will be in Afghanistan. What better way of doing it? So, yeah, I get inspired by people that don't do the norm. And the Simon Murray book, Legionnaire, for me was quite an inspirational thing, because everyone expected him to be, settle down and, be posh, well-to-do, and he just thought, sod it, where to go? Yeah, so anything that's inspirational, and watching-wise at the moment, I'm just into documentaries, any documentary, and a classic one is the one about the Gurkha, 14 Peaks.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely inspirational. And bear in mind that he was a member of the SBS as well, and just all inspiring. But it just goes to show, when you get people like Mester, who's a German climber, that took was it 3.5 or 4 years or something to climb all these peaks back in the day, whereas this guy, with all the funding that he's got, the helicopters and stuff like that, it's you can't compare, if that makes sense, because he's got all the best of the best of the best, whereas the old school climbers, probably a lot more difficult. It's the same as the first person to climb Everest. Slightly different now when you see all the tourists going up Everest, if that makes sense. Yeah, so anything inspirational, I find good to read.
Mick, thank you so much. I think this is the longest podcast I've done.
Well, my apologies for rabbing
No.
away.
I absolutely loved it. It was a pleasure, really, because I wasn't expecting you to give so many gold nuggets of wisdom and experience. And so I really appreciate it, and thank you for that.
Yeah, I must admit, I had a good chat with someone, and my SAS days were 20 odd years ago. You can just about read everything about the SAS online. So why hide the fact that I spent 14 years there. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I sleep well at night, if that makes sense. I'm not one of these. Yeah, I'm not one of these people that regrets things that we've done. If that makes sense. So yeah, just be honest and just say how it is.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I mean, we had a former SBS operator on Pasha, which was also a delight to talk to him. And
Yeah.
and I understand also for guys that come out maybe in the last 5 years that
Slightly
the
different.
pressure is slightly different.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but I think for us, because outside of the podcast and our work that we do with clients, we write a lot about historic missions and units and organizations. And as I said, the 14 int, that's one that me on a personal level I found massively interesting. But just to speak to somebody who went through it that's even better. So absolutely, thank you for that. If anybody wants to find you, I don't mean that in a weird sense, but if they want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, our website's out there, www.hawkesandco, HAWKES and ANDCO. So all one word.
Yeah, we will add that in the show notes, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And our mobile, our mobile numbers is on the website as well. So yeah, and like I say, we're forthright. We're very honest. We'll tell it exactly how it is, which is how it should be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, and I hope people don't spam your phone number and they call you too much, because that's always what I'm worried about. The very first podcast that I've done, which was a good friend of mine, Jason, who's a former Marine, U.S. Marine, and then a CIA officer. He said in the podcast, if anybody wants to learn, he's now a recruiter in U.S. intelligence community. He was, if somebody is an American and wants to learn about this, you can, Ahmed will give you my email. And then so many people reached out, and I was like, but I don't know you. I cannot give his email if I don't know you. So yeah, that was, so I hope that doesn't happen to you. But thank you again so much. And yeah, it was really a fascinating conversation, and thank you for your time.
No, my pleasure, and apologies for the dogs.
No. That's all good. That's all good. And for everybody listening, guys, if you made it this far, thank you for the support. And if you want to find Mick, we will add his information in the show notes, and give us some feedback, give us a review. Really appreciate that. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.